Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner and Auditor, for the presentation. So when we spoke about this issue last, I expressed some disappointment with the way the subject was introduced, as I think others have. And Senator Benson quite correctly reminded me, as she has again today, that fraud is incredibly important to this committee. To the extent that there is fraud and we lose $1 in one area, that's $1 that we can't spend on things that mean a lot to a lot of us: opioid reduction and homelessness and TANF funds. And that is exactly right. I take fraud extremely seriously, and I think some of the suggestions, particularly regarding the conflicts in the Inspector General's office, are very important. I thank Senator Hoffman for bringing those forward. That clearly needs to be addressed. I thought some of the suggestions that we have front-end tactics to avoid fraud rather than after-the-fact investigations were helpful. From the department, I thought the innovative suggestions surrounding electronic attendance tracking and clarifying absent and holidays were very meaningful. And Mr. Chairman, these are discussions that we can and should be having without the introduction of unsubstantiated tales. Senator Benson pointed out that when we do this work, we need to shield our hearts. I can't think of a worse way to do that than by coming forward with television production of a story that has several extraordinary allegations, none of which we could substantiate at the time. A spy novel, really, which alleged that not only the dollar amount was in excess of $100 million, which has not been documented, but that this money was confined exclusively to the Somali community and was leaving the country to African nations. And then that it was specifically going to terrorist organizations, and then perhaps the most extravagant detail, that it was being carted in airplanes in big suitcases, I think a detail which was only added for effect. Mr. Chair, you said I never really thought there were suitcases. Well, Mr. Chair, why did we view that video? Why did we give that the platform of this august body and play it for the world to see? Because when I think people see that, they think that the chair and the governing body here do believe those allegations and are putting them forward as a serious concern for the people of Minnesota. And not to mention that all of this reporting came from a gentleman whom I can only describe as a fabulist. He did not answer our questions on the day he was here. He declined to offer substantiation to the state auditor about these allegations and had to be subpoenaed to give any information at all. Perhaps most distressing, Mr. Chair, is that this story, unsubstantiated as it was, targeted a single community in the state of Minnesota, the Somali community, and that seemed to imply that fraud is confined, at least in part or a substantial part, to that community. We have heard no substantiation of that claim. We've heard no evidence to back that up. Mr. Chair, if that is true, it is very important. It will allow us to target investigations more accurately. If it is false, Mr. Chair, it is even more important that we know that, so that we do not stigmatize our neighbors indelibly without cause. Mr. Chair, you said that you're an imperfect chair, and I am an imperfect senator. We are all imperfect people. But for the scar that has left with the Somali community, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that that is insufficient contrition.